one of the most enduring myths which has existed up to the modern era and was the basis for the film 300 is that the Persians actually were defeated at the Battle of Thermopylae, or even if they were not defeated, they were significantly dealt a severe blow by a mere 300 Spartans. And this view has often been propagated in the Western world to demean the Persian and Iranian nation. Regardless, the truth is that the 300 Spartans did not actually win at Thermopylae. Thermopylae proved to be a costly Persian victory, nonetheless a Persian victory, and allowed the Persian army to move on into Athens and sack the city before finally being defeated at Plataea and Salamis and being expelled from Greece. Furthermore, what many don't mention is that the 300 Spartans were not alone at this battle, and they were accompanied by other allies from in and around the Greek city-states, and the total number was around 5,000 to 6,000 Greeks, and as high as around 7,400 Greeks. Probably these Greeks were up against at least 100,000 to 150,000 Persians, though the numbers could have been much less, but nonetheless, they were not alone, and the 300 Spartans only remained were in the battle until the end, but even then they were accompanied by around 400 or 500 other allies when the rest of the Greek allies had withdrawn. The Thespians decided to remain with the Spartans. So the myth that 300 Spartans alone took on an army of 100,000 Persians is complete fiction. It was not 300 Spartans, it was much more than that. And the only reason why the myth of the 300 Spartans is constantly promoted in Western society and by the Western media is because the 300 Spartans they have somehow become a part of Western folklore, when in reality Thermopylae was not really an ideal, it was not an ideal situation for the Greeks because they did lose. Obviously, they managed to inflict heavy casualties on the Persian army. Their defeat at Thermopylae allowed the Persians to capture and sack Athens, and this was actually quite remarkable. Now, obviously, the Persians did end up losing the war, but nonetheless, Thermopylae proved to be a decisive Persian victory. Even though the Persian army did suffer heavy losses, it managed to wipe out much of the Greek defensive force, as well as kill the Spartan king Leonidas, who has now become a great, a great figure in Western nationalism and a great figure of Western history and civilization. But nonetheless, in my opinion, Leonidas failed because he failed to prevent the Persians from strolling into the Greek, the heartland, which they did, and he also failed to prevent the sack of Athens. So again, this myth that somehow a mere 300 Spartans defeated a superior army of 100,000 to 250,000 Persians is completely ludicrous. In fact, Herodotus even says that there were 2 million Persians, which again is just silly and insane. I don't even know how such a army at that time it would be possible to if to have such an army, such a large army active. But nonetheless, I think the primary reason why such a myth is propagated by the Western media is to defame and demoralize the Persian nation as well as the Iranian people, and I think this is the primary reason why films such as 300 have received a lot of publicity. But nonetheless, all evidence has pointed towards a Persian victory at Thermopylae and a Greek defeat. Now, the reason why the Greeks were very successful at Thermopylae was because of their superior weaponry as well as their geographic advantage. The main issue with the Persian army was that it was built for open combat and combat in open terrain, not in crowded terrain, or terrain where there would be disadvantage to a highly mobile force, which the Persians were. In the warfare they practiced in the Near East, they managed to overwhelm their opponents and dominate much of the Near East because of the fact that they had amazing tactics which relied on mobility as well as agility. That is why the Persians mainly had shields made of wicker and spears which could not penetrate the armor of the Spartans and the other Greeks, as well as the fact that the Persian army was not formed to fight in such conditions. It was formed to fight in open terrains, primarily desert terrain. And once they came into Greece, it was a complete shock because they could not effectively utilize their tactics. And Thermopylae especially proved to be a tough battleground for the Persians because of the mere fact that it was very much a crowded, it was pretty much a narrow passageway rather. And the reason why the Persians struggled, though victorious in the end at Thermopylae, was because the narrow passage gave the Spartans an advantage, who were tightly packed together and managed to hold off the Persians for many days. But obviously, once the Persians had found a way around, they managed to inflict a defeat on the Spartan army and then marched into Athens and sacked the city. And the Persian army remained in the Greek mainland for a few more months, perhaps as much as a year, before they were finally expelled after their defeat at the Battle of Plataea, which proved to be the decisive land battle of the Second Greco-Persian War. But nonetheless, despite their defeats in the Greco-Persian Wars, Persia remained a dominant power as well, and was actually the world power for much of the remaining centuries until the conquest by Alexander the Great in 323 BCE. Oh, sorry, I meant that Alexander had conquered the Persian Empire by 327 BCE, and he actually died in 323 BCE. But nonetheless, that is beyond the point. The main point here is that Thermopylae is not the battle that many in the West believe it was, and it was not a defeat for the Persians. It did not stop the Persian army from marching into Athens and sacking the city, and it did not halt the power or prestige of the Persian Empire, which continued to remain a very prestigious and powerful state until its conquest by Alexander the Great. Now, another thing here is that oftentimes Thermopylae has been used to demonize Persians, and the most notable example of this is the film 300. I'm not really taking a look at 300, but I may do so in the future sometime. I think it's unnecessary though, because many people have done so already. But clearly 300 is just a fictionalized and heavily romanticized narrative of this battle, as well as the entire Greco-Persian Wars and even the Persian army. The Persians in that film are very much, demonized and humiliated, and most of this solely goes back to the fact that Iran and Iranians are seen as a pariah today, and this is just a way in which the Western media wants to portray the Persians. It's not. It has nothing to do with ancient history. It's not based on any accurate portrayals. It's just something the modern day Western media wants to do demonize and humiliate the Iranian and Persian nation. So that is it for this video. I appreciate all the listeners, and I'm glad if you listen to this video to the end. And I'll be uploading more regularly now, probably not every day, but probably still maybe once or twice or three times a week. Maybe this week I may actually upload more since I have a lot of time. I'll see, but thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and thanks for the support. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so.